Good evening, Internet. I hope you're all staying safe and well. And for the record, this is being filmed at the very end of April 2020. We've just completed our first full calendar month of lockdown. I think it's fair to say that the panic may have subsided, but we are all heartily sick of this now. And for any of you who are watching in the future, you know, maybe it's 2021 or 22, and you're looking back and you're feeling a bit hacked off with life as it is at the moment. Remember back to this. Remember lockdown. Remember the highlight of your day being your hour-long state-sanctioned walk, and then it's back to the grindstone for the rest of the day. Well, this month I've been looking at the one and only Thibeaux, known rather more popularly by his stage name of Thibeaux Walker. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the guy's life and career and the general history aspects of him in a blog post in a couple of weeks' time. What I want to do now is try and show off a couple of his licks and his approaches to playing a 12-bar. I think he's something of something of an overlooked figure in the blues pantheon, because really he was a guy who inspired an awful lot of people, like, for example, B.B. King, like Chuck Berry. The first time I heard this classic Thibeaux Walker lick, and I thought, I know that. Of course I know that. It's from Johnny B. Good. He was the guy who Chuck Berry listened to and tried to emulate, or one of them anyway. And for that, I think he's an extraordinarily important part of blues and therefore rock guitar history. Right, talk a little bit about his style. We'll talk about the lead stuff first, I think. His weapon of choice, as with all those guys, was of course the minor pentatonic. I've chosen the key of G because that's what he seemed to favour that key, at least judging from the stuff I've been working through. And his signature song, Stormy Monday, is based on a 12-bar progression in G. So then we've got G minor pentatonic, root, flat third, fourth, fifth, flat seven. Now what he was wanting to do was add a second in. In this key, that's the A note here on the 5th fret of the high E. Also a little bit of 6th, that's the E here on the 5th fret of the D string. And occasionally the flat 5, that's the C sharp here on the 6th fret of the G string. And of course, a little bit of ambiguity moving between minor third, that's B flat there on the 3rd fret, to major, that's the B on the 4th fret. We are not yet in the era of soaring string bends and sustain, so you're not going to get bends like that because you're playing an archtop guitar strung with almost certainly a wound G. So although string bends were an important part of his style, that type of idea, they're very, very small bends. We're talking a semitone, maybe even just a quarter tone, nothing more than that. If you're watching this and thinking, well, he's a bit of a wuss, wasn't he? and you've only ever played a Stratocaster strung with 8s or something like that, yeah, go and pick up an arch top and with 13s and a wound G on it, and you'll discover why string bends at this stage in blues development were not a big part of his technique. Okay, let's look at a couple of licks then. Now, his main contribution, I suppose, the lick that we all play all the time, that's a slight bend on the G at the 5th fret, followed by the 3rd fret on the E and the B and the E string, and we tend to use that as a springboard into other stuff. But he's the first guy to really use that lick, certainly that I've come across transcribing, and it's made its way, it's become, you can't play guitar and not play that lick really. So that's our springboard into all sorts of things. Magic 3 notes. Okay, next thing then, you do get a sense of it with him of that he's making the absolute most out of a very limited palette of notes. Another signature trick that I found is simply playing the minor pentatonic with a kind of a swung 8th feel. I've heard him do that in a couple of songs, and it's a really cool distinctive thing. But all it is, you got that little followed by walking down the minor pentatonic, playing each note twice, often followed up with a slide from flat 3rd to major 3rd, root and 5th. And it's a really cool, really distinctive little rundown. It's also interesting that you couldn't play that without the swing. If you played it without the swing, you get, and that just sounds, it doesn't work somehow. Give it a little bit of the swing or shuffle, which is where, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, you're going to elongate the downbeat and make the upbeat correspondingly shorter. So instead of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, you get 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you're wondering where you've heard that rhythm before, yes, it's a train. Why is it a train? How do you think blues players would get from gig to gig? And what do you think they would do whilst they were on that train? It's not like they had an iPod. So you would take influence from the sounds around you and try and replicate them. That's why swing and shuffle are so prevalent in blues. So that's why you've got replicating the movement on train tracks. And we can also use that phrasing in this lick. But he was also very clever in his use of almost sequencing his notes. So there, for example, pretty conventional so far, but then he'll go up to the 2nd, kind of emphasising the point. And he would build on that technique to create lines that flow across the bar line. There's some incredibly intricate licks of his that I've been transcribing. These things will be just flows of pentatonic notes, 2 or 3 bars long. And so cramming some of these, trying to memorise some of these things has been really quite an eye-opener. His technical facility, given given where he was in terms of in terms of history, in terms of the development of the guitar, is really quite phenomenal. And he's definitely somebody I would recommend checking out for that. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about licks. Let's also talk about some of the cool stuff that he does with chords. Now, big fan of the 9th chord. And he does seem to use that a lot in the intro, certainly to his slower blues numbers. Now, the 9th chord, if you're not familiar with it, is root 3rd, 5th, flat 7 and 9. The shape that I'm using here starts as a C. I add the flat 7, that's the B flat note, 3rd fret on the G. I add the 9th, that's the D note, 3rd fret on the B. Gets me here. Now what he'll quite often do as an intro is sit on the 5 and weirdly flattened 6 chords of the key. So in G that would be the D and E flat. Flat 6, 5, flat 6, 5. And And in quite a few of his songs, he will also go on to introduce an augmented chord into that shape. Augmented are root third and sharp 5. So what I'm doing here, then here's my root, here's my third. There's where my 5th would be. I'm sharpening it. Quick note on theory: augmented chords sound as weird as they do because they're symmetrical. You've got root up a third to the third, up another major third to the sharp 5, up another major third takes you round to your octave. So a classic T-Bone Walker intro using the tension between the flat 6 and the 5 chords, and then going to an augmented voicing on the 5. And you'll certainly hear him do something very, very similar on Stormy Monday. And that's that classic T-Bone Walker sound. He's also weirdly quite fond of using it in turnarounds. There's a turnaround in one version of Stormy Monday that I heard, which really had me scratching my head. And I realised I got the first shape, and it just sounded like... And all he's doing is he's taking that augmented, shifts it up a tone, up another tone, then brings it back again. And it's just the coolest little jazzy lick in there. Had me scratching my head for a good few minutes before I got that one figured out. Yeah, I'll go back to the 9th chord. Now, what he'll quite often do is give this effect. Now, this is known as the 6/9 slide or the gospel slide. And what I'm doing over here, I'm on the 4 chord, that's a C9, and I'm taking these 2 notes here. The G and the E string notes, that's a B flat and that's a G, so that's a flat 7 and a 5. Sliding that up, and that's a root and a 6. You can also use the middle note as well on the B string. That will go you from a 9th up to a 3rd and back. And he quite often does that to provide a little bit of momentum and movement in his rhythm parts. On the G chord, here I'm going to apply a G7. I'm cheating a little bit, hitting the root with my thumb. 3rd, 4th and 3rd on the D, G and B strings, giving me flat 7, 3rd and 5th. I'm going to play just the D and B strings for this one. Slide up a tone and back. And that's going to go from flat 7 to root and 5th up to 6th again. And he will also frame his chord changes with a little bit of chromaticism. So a typical slow blues in G for T-Bone Walker, often including a quick change, which for those of you who aren't familiar with the blues terminology, that means you're jumping up to the 4 chord on the 2nd bar before back to the 1 on the 3rd and the 4th bar. So quite often a sort of T-Bone-ized 12 bar will look a little like this. I'm not going to talk about how the Stormy Monday changes have mutated over the years, because if you listen to his original, it is pretty much just that, stock 12 bar in G. Right, so having improvised a little bit and talked a little bit about his licks and choice of chords, it's time to do the acid test. Let's put on the Control jam track made by my good friend Lee Blount, Lee B on YouTube, and let's see if I've got any better then. Let's see what a month of lockdown has taught me. Well, there we go. Thank you very much, Internet. Hope you've enjoyed that. And stay safe. See you next month. Oh, and happy birthday, Captain Tom Moore.